No one awakens by accident. You have to will it. Buddhist truths of the will. Someone once said that there are basically two kinds of truths in the world: truths of the observer and truths of the will. Truths of the observer are things that are true regardless of what you do, that have nothing to do with your ideas about things, what you want, what you don't want. They're just the way of the world. This is what science is all about. And to learn these truths, you can't let your wants get in the way. This kind of truth also describes a lot of things you see day to day. As for truths of the will, those are things that exist only if you will them into being. They depend on your wants. You decide that this is something you want and you act on it. Say you want to be a concert pianist. That's going to become true only if you decide that this something you really want, that it's worth working on, and you stick with that decision. Truths of the will. When you look at the things that mean the most to us in life, most of them are truths of the will. If you just looked at the world from the point of view of an observer, everything would be pretty pointless. We get born, we grow up, we struggle to survive, and then we die. That's pretty much it. What's the point of all that? Many times you look back on your life and you think of all the things that you fought over, all the things that you worked hard to get, and even if you got them, they just slipped through your fingers. You wonder, what was that all about? Many people look back on their whole lives and that's all they see. What was that all about? Why all that suffering? So if you want to have a point to your life, you have to will it into being. Many of the Buddha's teachings explain why this is so. Your experience of the present moment comes from what? The results of past actions, your current intentions, and the results of your current intentions. That's an interaction between truths of the will and truths of the observer, i.e., you willed things in the past, and then that set into motion certain causal forces, some of which came out in ways you didn't intend. But that's simply because that's the way the world is. That's how causality works. You didn't work the process right, but now you've got your current intentions and they're having an effect right now, and they are going to have an effect on into the future, and they offer you the chance to get it right this time. So it's up to you to decide. Is there going to be a point to all this? Is there going to be a direction to all these different intentions? Or are you just going to muck around in your life and at the end wonder what was that all about? Even the way we suffer comes under these two kinds of truths. There's the truth of the three characteristics, which is that anything willed is going to be inconstant, stressful, and not self. Anything that's subject to conditions is going to be stressful. But then there's also the suffering that comes from craving, especially unskillful craving. The first kind of suffering you can't do much about, but you can make a difference with that second kind. This is an area where your will has a lot to say, has a lot of impact if you focus it properly. Putting an end to suffering is a big job, but it is humanly possible. And because it is possible, it's really worthwhile to focus your energies in that direction. That really does give a worthwhile direction to your life. Some people decide they want to be a concert pianist, but then when they become a concert pianist, they find that it's not really as fulfilling as they thought it would be. Someone wants power, gains power, and then abuses it, misuses it, creating a lot of suffering, both for himself and for a lot of other people, which is going to have consequences for a long time down the line. So for your life to have a point, you have to have a goal, and you want to choose a wise goal. This is why the Buddha seems to be the wisest, a total end to suffering. That requires developing a lot of important qualities in the mind, things you have to will into being. You look at your life and it doesn't seem like there's much opportunity to put an end to suffering, but again, you're looking at the things that an observer would look at. The end of suffering is a truth of the will, and if you focus your energies in that direction, it does become possible. You look at all the verses of the elder monks, elder nuns, and a lot of them started out in really miserable circumstances. If you just looked at the facts of their lives, you would have thought, no chance for this person. And yet somehow they pulled themselves together and decided that this is what they wanted out of life. After all, desire is a factor of the path. It's right there in right effort. You generate desire to develop skillful qualities. You generate the desire to abandon unskillful qualities. That kind of desire is good. You just need to learn how to focus it properly to create the right conditions. I was reading a book a while back on analyzing people who had started out their adult lives in really bad shape psychologically, and yet they were able to pull themselves together. Tolstoy was an example. As a young person, he looked pretty hopeless, and then he somehow pulled it all together and became a great novelist, an inspiration to a lot of peacemakers. In the book I was reading, it was basically psychotherapy applied to history or psychoanalysis applied to history, which often is a pretty sordid affair. Usually they want to ferret out who had strange sexual desires and who had strange psychological problems and just leave it at that. But in this case, the analysis was meant to derive lessons on how is it that some people who start out in really bad shape manage to get it together. That's psychoanalysis applied to history with a real point. The conclusions were not anything really surprising, but it's important to remember that some of the basic facts of life, the most important ones, are things we tend to overlook. The conclusions here pointed out basically two things. First, in each case, the person found someone who really believed in him or her and encouraged him or her to develop skillful qualities. Second, that person had a belief system that emphasized that it really was important to make something of yourself, something of more than just ordinary value. This is what we have in the Dharma and the Sangha. For the Sangha, you've got people who believe in the worthwhile endeavor, the value of developing skillful qualities and encouraging other people to develop skillful qualities. It creates the right social environment for learning how to mature. And then second, there's the system, the belief system or the values of the Dhamma, that if you develop skillful qualities in your mind, it really does make a difference not only for yourself, but for all the people around you. There is a value to learning how to will, or to intend things in a skillful way. It really does make a difference. Science can't teach you that. Science tells us that the sun is going to go nova someday, so all your efforts to do something with your life are going to get burned up anyhow. Scientists just are concerned with truths of the observer. We're dealing with truths of the will. What do you want to make with your life? It's possible to make all kinds of things given the raw materials you have. Often you may find that, given your past karma, current circumstances are not all that good. But remember several things. 1. Past karma is not totally determining what's going to happen in the future. You make decisions from moment to moment. 2. What you see right now is not the sum total or running balance of your karma account. Think of your past actions more like lots of accounts, or lots of seeds that can sprout and grow and blossom at different times. You may be going through a fallow period right now when not many good seeds are blossoming and some bad seeds are blossoming instead, but that doesn't mean you don't have good seeds in your karma accounts. So what you want to do is to work right now on what the skillful decision is right now. As for what's going to come from your past karma, learn how to treat whatever it is with skill. Associate with people who will encourage you in that direction. Encourage within yourself the beliefs and understandings that give value to that way of approaching your life. Because one of the things about truths of the will is that often you see people for whom you think. There's no chance that this person is going to be a concert pianist. There's no chance that this person is going to make anything out of his or her life. That's what it looks like from the outside. But a lot of very unlikely people have managed to succeed given the right conditions, as I said, finding the right people to associate with and having a strong belief in the importance of their actions. This is why faith in the Buddha's awakening is such an important thing, because the Buddha was awakened by what? By his own actions. And it wasn't any special divine quality that he had and we don't have. He simply developed the qualities that he had that we can develop as well. So, look at your life and see what qualities need to be developed in that direction. The traditional list of the perfections is a good one to think about, because it can apply not only to monastic life, but also to lay life. And not only to times when you're on retreat like this, or times when you're in the monastery, or times when you're meditating, but to all your activities throughout the day. Look at all your activities as opportunities to develop good qualities in your mind, because those are the things that last. The Buddha calls them noble treasures because when you develop good qualities in the mind, they stay with you, not only in this lifetime, but on into future lifetimes. What are the perfections? Generosity, virtue, renunciation, discernment, energy, tolerance or endurance, truth, determination, goodwill, and equanimity. Sometimes when conditions are difficult, you've got to work on the equanimity and the endurance. Other times when opportunities are good, you have to work more on the energy, not to let good opportunities pass you by. When you keep these qualities in mind, you find that you've got the opportunity to practice the Dhamma, to develop qualities that should work in your dealings with other people. Now you may look at your life and feel that your circumstances are not conducive enough. That's when you may decide that you have to change the circumstances of your life. But the basic conditions you need are the two I mentioned just now. Learn to associate with people who believe, 1, in the importance of developing skillful qualities, and 2, in your ability to do it. Building on that, hold to the conviction that if you want your life to have a point, you have to give it a point, and you can do that. No matter how discouraging the facts you can observe in your life, don't believe that the observable facts are telling the total story, or that your future is already cast in concrete. You constantly have the ability to change your mind, to develop more skillful intentions, to learn from your past mistakes, so that you can bring those truths of the will to fruition. The will to awaken. There's a passage where the Buddha describes his knowledge of the fate of other people, or the destinations of other people. He says it's like watching a man walking along a path that doesn't fork off in any other direction. It goes straight to one destination, and the Buddha notes that if the man continues to follow that path, he's going to end up at that destination. Notice, it's contingent on the man's continuing on that path. After all, he might choose not to follow that path. He might change his mind, turn around. There's another passage where the Buddha is asked, is the whole world going to release? Half the world? A third? And he refuses to answer. Ananda, who's afraid that the man who asked the question is going to get upset, takes the man aside and says, it's like a gatekeeper to a fortress. There's only one gate to the fortress. The gatekeeper walks around the fortress and he doesn't see even the slightest opening in the fortress wall, not even one big enough for a cat to slip through. So he comes to the conclusion, he doesn't know how many people are going to come into the fortress, how many people will leave the fortress, but he does know that if they're going to come in or leave, they have to go through the gate. Again, the point here is that we have the choice to go into the gate or not go into the gate. It's up to us. It's a free choice. It's not imposed on us by our nature. We have to will it. To get on the path to awakening, you have to desire it. It's an act of will. It's a truth of the will. William James talks about two kinds of truths: truths of the observer and truths of the will. A truth of the observer is the type where you see cause and effect that are totally independent of your desire for them to be in a certain way. knowledge about astronomy, say, or about the laws of nature. You have to take your desire out of the equation if you're going to see these truths. You have to be, as much as possible, a non-interfering observer. You interfere a little bit here and there in order to test cause and effect, to see exactly what cause is connected to what effect. But you have to accept the results whether you like them or not. If your likes get in the way, you're not really going to see those truths. Truths of the will, however, are a different matter entirely. You have to want them to be true in order for them to become true. If you're going to become a good pianist, a good carpenter, you have to want those things in order for them to happen. It helps if you have some natural inclination in that direction or some natural talents. But to be really good, you have to have a strong desire. Without that desire, they're not going to happen. In this case, your likes and dislikes are important. They're actually a part of the truth. This is the way it is with the path. We're not here just simply watching things passively. What we're learning is not a truth of the observer, it's a truth of the will. Awakening is something that has to be pursued. The deathless, of course, is not created by your desire, but the path is. It's something fabricated. When you look at the qualities that lead to awakening, things like the 10 perfections, they come under the headings of what the Buddha talks of as the adhithana dhamma, things that are willed. There are actually 4: discernment, truth, relinquishment, and peace, or calming. All of these are things that we have to will in order to find them. Now the problem with will, of course, is it can be blind, which is why discernment comes first. You want to will discernment for it to happen. It's not a question of whether you're born smart or not smart. It comes from developing 2 qualities. One is having conviction. Again, this is where that issue of the truth of the will comes in. You have to be convinced that this is a worthwhile activity, trying to develop your discernment, trying to find awakening. You have to be convinced that it's possible. If you don't believe it's possible, it's not going to happen. It's like the person stuck in the woods. If you don't believe that there's a path out of the woods, you're not going to try to look for it. If you don't try to look for it, you're not going to find it. So conviction that your actions really do make a difference. Conviction that the Buddha really did gain awakening. These are an important part of discernment. The 5 strengths that end in discernment begin with conviction. As one of the Ajahns in Thailand once said, it's not the case that discernment begins with perceptions or ideas or concepts. It begins with conviction that there is a way out and that it can be found through your own actions. The other aspect of discernment is that you see what the important questions are. As the Buddha said, the big question is seeing where there's suffering, where there's stress, what's causing it, and what actions put an end to it. Those are the important questions in life. When you learn how to focus on those, it cuts through a lot of garbage. And then when you look at what qualities need to be developed in order to put an end to suffering, you find that there are also qualities required to improve your discernment. You need to develop more mindfulness, more alertness, more concentration. And part of that quest for the end of suffering involves goodwill. Goodwill for yourself, goodwill for the people around you, because you realize that if your happiness depends on their suffering, it's not going to happen. They're going to try to block it or undo it. So you have to find a happiness that's harmless to everybody. So that's the first thing you will, the will to discernment. It helps you see what goal is a good goal, and also what is clearly a good way to attain that goal. You're going to have to learn a lot of this path on your own as you go along. It's something you discover. All too often we read a book saying what it's going to be like. You're going to gain this insight and then that insight. The problem is, when you've read those descriptions, you can force the mind in such a position that it starts having those insights. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're true, that they're genuine insights. You have to learn how to be more observant on your own, more alert, to see what insights actually bring freedom from suffering. This means you have to look all around you and all around your insights. As a John Lee once said, when you gain an insight, you have to turn it over to see to what extent it really is true, to what extent it's false, to what extent the opposite would be true. Only then can you know that you're not just programming yourself or trying to clone what you've read. Again, that would be a case of trying to make your discernment grow from your concepts, as opposed to the conviction there's got to be a way out. You've got to find that way for yourself, with the Buddha's directions, of course, but it's based on your own powers of mindfulness and alertness, so you catch yourself to make sure that your defilements don't get in the way. So that's how we will discernment. The next thing we will is truthfulness. Part of truthfulness is the quality of self-honesty. As the Buddha said, "Let a person come who is honest and no deceiver, and I'll teach that person the Dhamma." This is the first prerequisite for getting on the path, to be truthful. This doesn't mean just telling the truth, but also means deciding which you've got to do and sticking with it, being true to your intentions. This is where the precepts or virtue as a perfection comes in. Once you've realized that you don't want to harm anybody, you've got to follow through and really abstain from activities that are harmful, whether it's easy to abstain or not. Discernment helps here, in its practical mode. When you find that a precept goes against your desires, you've got to use your discernment to find ways of making yourself want to stick with it, making it easier to stick with it, learning to cast a jaundiced eye on your desires, realizing that they promise all kinds of things, but can you really trust them? You use your discernment to stay true to your intention and to find skillful ways of taking the wind out of the sails of your unskillful desires. That way, you can hang on to what you know is really in your best interests and in the best interests of the people around you. The third thing that we have to will is relinquishment, learning how to let go. This is where the perfections of renunciation and giving come in. Giving here means giving away not only material things, but also our unskillful desires, giving up our unskillful ways of holding on to things. Sometimes it comes naturally, easily, and sometimes it doesn't. And again, this is where you need to use your discernment, learning strategies to make you more and more inclined to give up things you have to give up, things that get in the way, the lesser pleasures that get in the way of greater happiness. This is not a matter of just giving up things that are obviously unskillful. I did a survey once on the topic of relinquishment in books of American Buddhism. In the few cases where they actually talk about relinquishment, they focus on relinquishing unhealthy relationships and relinquishing your controlling mindset. We don't really need the Buddha tell you relinquish those things. Your parents can tell you to relinquish unhealthy relationships. If you have a psychotherapist, the therapist will tell you to relinquish your controlling mindset. There are a lot of things that are really pleasurable, that society actually encourages you to look for, but the Buddha says, look, you've got to give them up as they lead to unhealthy attachments down the line. Your attachment to sensual pleasures and sensual desires, that's the big one. Your attachment to thoughts about, plans about sensual pleasures, that's what you have to learn how to renounce. Go beyond the limits of will. An important step is learning to see the rewards of renunciation. It's not going to leave you deprived. It really is restful to the mind. It really gives peace to the mind. There's a famous story about the monk, a former king, sitting in the forest exclaiming, "What bliss! What bliss!" And it turns out he's not pining after the joys he felt when he was a king before he became a monk. He's exclaiming over how blissful he is now that he can sit under the tree without having to worry about all the people who wanted to kill him when he was a king, all the people who wanted to take away his pleasures and wealth. That's one of the pleasures of renunciation, that sense of freedom, and nobody's going to try to steal that from you. And as the monk said to the Buddha, his mind was now like a wild deer. It was free. You've got to learn how to think in those ways when the desire for sensuality really gets strong, to see that when you can renounce it, you're free. And again, you have to will that. It doesn't come naturally. As the Buddha once said, even he didn't find it easy to will renunciation. His mind didn't leap up at the idea, but his desire for a deathless happiness was strong enough, and he coupled it with the discernment that could help him find ways of reasoning with his mind, find tactics for giving the mind pleasures that didn't have to depend on sensuality, primarily the pleasure of jhana, the pleasure of concentration. When you have an alternative source of pleasure like that, you realize that you're trading candy for gold. But the ability to make that trade is something you have to will. The fourth thing is peace. The Pali word upasama also means stilling or calm. And there are two perfections that are associated with that: patience and equanimity. The word patience can also mean endurance, the ability to put up with difficult things. Here again, you use your discernment to find strategies to strengthen that ability. One of the primary strategies is learning not to focus on the difficulty, but to find ways of encouraging yourself, giving yourself energy. This is closely related to relinquishment and renunciation. You learn how to see the areas, the advantages of enduring. The mind becomes stronger. It can live in more difficult situations. It's not such a slave to its desires as it was before. There's a freedom that comes with endurance. And equanimity, too, is something you have to will. The ability to stay unperturbed with the things you like and the things you don't like, not getting excited when things go well, not getting depressed when they don't. In other words, you train yourself to have a certain amount of independence. Discernment is needed to perfect and understand this quality, and the equanimity helps foster the discernment, allowing you to see things more clearly as well. The two qualities go hand in hand. There are times in the meditation where you do simply have to sit and watch. Some of your defilements really will go away just when you watch them, but not all of them. One of the points of developing equanimity is so you begin to see where the difference lies. So the Buddha is not recommending a blanket passivity here. He's telling you to develop equanimity when it's appropriate. You develop equanimity when you need to see things that you don't yet understand. When you understand, sometimes equanimity is still appropriate, and sometimes you need to do something more forceful to deal with the problem at hand. All of these are things we have to will if we want to make progress on the path. The if there is important. We're free to will these qualities, we're free not to. This is why the Buddha never talked about Buddha nature, the idea that somehow our inherent nature is going to lead us to awakening. We do have freedom though, the freedom to choose, and the Buddha was a great respecter of that freedom. It's a little scary to think about the fact that awakening is not inevitable, for it's so easy to fall off the path. Sometimes the idea of inevitable awakening is much more reassuring, but it will make us complacent, which is precisely the quality that will lead us astray. We need to develop the heedfulness that comes when we realize that we are free to choose, that we can make right choices and wrong choices, and that we have to live with the consequences. This is why the Buddha said that heedfulness is what lies at the basis of all that is skillful. So try to develop that and learn how to live with that and not get scared by it. Learn how to make it energizing so that it keeps you alert while at the same time developing the sense of patience and equanimity, the calm that protects the effort of the path so that it doesn't get you all frazzled and worn out. So these are the qualities that we will on the path. These are the qualities that lead to awakening. If we learn how to respect our freedom, then that puts us on the path so that we understand what's going on. Ultimately, of course, all of these qualities will bring us to something that's not willed at all, but we're not going to really see it. We're not going to be able to test it and understand what's willed and what's not willed until we learn to understand our will very thoroughly, how far it goes, what subtle levels of willing can happen in the mind. In other words, We have to push the envelope of our will. So ultimately, this truth of the will does finally lead to something totally unwilled. This is one of the paradoxes of the teaching, but one that the Buddha is very upfront about. You're looking for something unfabricated, but you have to fabricate the path. As he said, the highest of all fabrications, which is another word for the highest of all things you can will, is the noble eightfold path. There is a Dhamma higher than that, totally unwilled, which is dispassion, the rest that comes when you've succeeded in putting in the energy that's needed to will the path in a skillful way. What this means is that the choice is up to us, which path we're going to follow, for there are many paths. There is a path that leads to hell. There's a path that leads to the animal rebirth. There is a path that leads to the human rebirth and divine birth. And there is a path that leads to total awakening. The Buddha set them all out, but it's up to us to choose.